a pleasure to welcome in the host of KNBR's Dirty Work and the 49ers pregame show host on KNBR, Adam Copeland. Adam, how are you?
What's going on, bro? Good to be on with you, dude.
Yeah, very much looking forward to today's conversation, in part because we'll get into the state of radio in the Bay Area, the future of this medium that we both love. And really, I want to start the conversation with this. It's mid-November. The 49ers are struggling. The Warriors are off to a colder start than anyone anticipated. And the Giants don't seem like they're going to be a big ticket player in free agency. How do you fill 20 hours a week on live sports talk radio these days? Like, what do you go to when you know you want to get fans involved?
Well, first of all, how dare you leave out the San Jose Sharks, who had another thrilling win the other night, an overtime win where they came back from down 1-0 in the third period and won it 2-1 in overtime. You got to love these kids, like the 86 Giants, the young San Jose baby Sharks. Filling 20 hours a week, I think that's my most common question when somebody finds out what my job is and they ask, well, you talk for 4 hours a day? And I go, well, yeah, that and commercials, and you've got a partner, and you've got guests and whatnot. It's not all me for sure. I mean, you know, my partner, Derek Papa, Tim Webb, who helped produce the show and really do produce the show. I mean, every day it's about mapping out what topics do Bay Area sports fans want to hear about. How do we pull topics out of every topic that we did yesterday? Can we extrapolate that into something else? Can we repurpose something that we've done in the past? And I think, as you know, our show, Dirty Work, like, we try not to be too in the weeds when it comes to sports. I mean, we get into it, of course. We are a sports station and a sports network, and it's what people want to hear about when they watch or listen to our show. But I think in general, we're about trying to create something entertaining. We don't need to react to every moment from every game or break down every play from last night because we're on at 2:00 in the afternoon. You've got two other shows before us to do that. So I think it's really about finding out what your audience is comfortable with hearing when they want to hear it. And I think, you know, we're kind of a goofball show. We try to rely on pop culture. We try to rely on our creativity, on some of the humor that the guests will provide us to sort of branch that into some other topics. But I mean, you're right. I mean, this is one of the better times of the year. I mean, we just passed a sports equinox, right? Where we had hockey, basketball, baseball, and football all on the same day. But really, the hardest time of the year, and you know this, is when you get into like mid-July and you're waiting for football to start and all you got is baseball. February is a brutal month because it's all speculative stuff. When you have games going on, there's always topics. When you're just speculating about things and waiting for a season to start, that's where it gets tiresome, and that's where you really got to be creative. But 4 hours a day, it's funny. It's not as daunting to me as it used to feel. It's when you have a partner and you have a rhythm and you've got as many events going on in the Bay Area as we do, I think we have a pretty good time with it.
You grew up listening to KNBR. I grew up listening to KNBR. And I think even 10 years ago, when we both kind of first got our start in live sports talk radio, if you had said people under the age of 40 are doing drive time afternoon radio in San Francisco in the Bay Area, it would have sounded crazy. And yet here you are, here Derek Papa, your coworker and your colleague and co-host are doing this. What has changed about sports talk radio so drastically in the last 10 years that has kind of sped up the timeline for people like you, people like Derek, and I'll say it, people like myself as well?
Well, I think you'd agree with this. Like, we're past the days of the guy on the sports network. And I'm going to use this as an example, and I don't mean to, it's not to denigrate this guy. Jim Rome is a good example of this, right? There used to be the Jim Rome type of host across the country where you're the hot take guy. You're the guy who can tell everybody how it is, and people listen to you, and they either hate you and they call in and hate you, or they love you and they call in and they love you and they agree with you, or they hate you. They basically will listen to you for any reason, for anything that you say, right? But because that was the only show in town, basically wherever you were, we're beyond the point now where somebody can sit there and yell at the listeners or yell at their partner or yell at whoever the guest is and be just, this is the end all be all. I sort of feel like, not that age has something to do with this, but we grew up in the age where that was kind of hot take sports radio was basically the Jim Rome show, right? That's kind of where that spawned off of. I feel like that evolution has changed now because you're not the only show in town. You've got to give everybody who's listening a reason to listen to you. You can't be the guy who knows better than everybody all the time. There's experts everywhere. We've got what they call them now, I guess, content miners, but everybody's got a YouTube show. I mean, we're doing a video chat right now. So there's so many other people who feel like they've got a grasp from whatever their platform is to be able to provide that information or that entertainment value that if you don't provide, at least on the radio, for what somebody in their car is listening to be entertaining, they're going to go somewhere else. They're going to go find something else. I don't think that age is really a reason why that's evolved today, or why we've gotten a better opportunity. I do think that our I would say our demographic is more akin, I feel like, to that level of conversation, that we're seeing a more
Yeah.
convert. Like, we've also seen the evolution, like on our station. You remember, Kerry, where every show had two hosts, and for a while, every show had three hosts. And the rival station, 95.7 The Game, the same sort of thing happened. Then they would go back to two hosts, then our station would go back to two hosts. It's just kind of like it's constant sort of massaging, moving, analyzing, evaluating, developing, and moving things around and different puzzle pieces to see what's going to work. So I can't say for sure why we as younger guys have gotten an opportunity. I'd love to say it has to do with streaming and podcasts and whatnot, but I don't really think that has anything to do with it. I think it's just about um, being able to create an entertaining product. And I think that if you want to get really obvious about it, or you want to be really cut and dry about it, I'm sure people are going to hear this and think this and wonder why I didn't say it initially. Financially, younger people are in general easier to pay. It's the companies have been strained financially. They've trimmed off a lot of the fat in terms of after COVID, trying to make sure that they're spending money in the right places. And so, because they've done that, we now have had more opportunities, I think, because they want to keep their product alive, yet they're not going to spend $400,000 for a host in the afternoon like they used to for 20 plus years. So I think a lot of it is the opportunity cost, is that it's too expensive to run a station the way you used to. I think part of it is the evolution of how people listen to content. I don't think there's any one answer, but I think you and I are both grateful for it.
Yeah, I would go back to when we were first emerging from COVID lockdowns, and you felt like maybe radio is dying altogether. Maybe people aren't going to be as attached anymore. And all of a sudden, there's kind of been this wave of innovation, I would say, at local stations around the Bay Area, and really local radio stations around the country, that are tapping into their huge social media audiences, that are now tapping into YouTube and Twitch and Twitter. You're live across 4 or 5 different platforms every time you sit behind the microphone. How has all of this live streaming actually changed the mechanics of your show? Because it feels like you and Derek and your afternoon show at KNBR Dirty Work, you guys have a real direct relationship with your audience that may not have existed for any show 10 years ago.
Well, I would say the number one thing that has changed or evolved is interaction with listeners. And I don't think I ever anticipated this would change the culture of the show or evolve the show into what it's become, because we've had the text line forever. Kerry knows, like, when we started at KNBR, you'd walk into the studio and the text line was literally a cell phone, like an iPhone, that would sit there on the table, and you'd have to go through the text messages and just kind of scroll and be like, 415 says, 510 says. Then it became a platform, which is a website. It's a text website where we still get to see all the texts that come in. What I never ever considered was how the texters were communicating with us, but they weren't communicating with each other. And so the YouTube platform, the Twitch platform, our website, thesportsleader.com, and the app and all that stuff, which streams Twitch through it. What's incredible to me is the community of listeners that have evolved with each other alongside the show. We call our listeners the filth on Dirty Work, as a lot of people I'm sure watching or listening know. That's like our listener group, is we've given them the name, but they've embraced that, and they now get together. I've had people tweet at me and Derek on the weekend saying, hey, members of the filth watching football, like people who have met, created community via the YouTube chat. So I would say our leaning into creating the community and communicating with them, because it's one thing to text somebody back and respond and say, hey, thanks for listening, thanks for texting the show. It's another to be able to talk to people every day. And part of that, Kerry, is the amount of people who either never went back to an office or did go back to an office, but because of the evolution of streaming, have decided to make this their daily companion. I worked at an auto body shop in an office, not in the body shop itself, right after high school. And I would listen to KNBR all day long when I sat in the office. It was the only thing that was of any entertainment value to me while I sat at a desk at a computer all summer when I was 18 years old. I feel like that's what this has become now for a lot of these people. We have listeners every day: Tacky, Rockin' New Era, AJ Cruz, Pine Needle, all these people on the YouTube chat who are sitting there at work at their desk, and this is part of their daily routine and community. I had never considered that community is what people strive for, not just with us, but with each other. And live radio, when something happens in real time and you remember where you were when it happened, being able to share that with somebody else, I think, has made us really unique.
Yeah, I want to go back. You were talking about working in the office of an auto body shop, and there were random jobs that I worked along the line that wouldn't at all have intersected with sports talk radio. But throughout working those jobs, I was listening to sports talk radio
Yeah.
through the years, and I want to go back to when you first got into the industry. How did you get your foot in the door, and how did you get really on the air? Because I think for people under 30, that was like impossible to do in 2015, 2016. You managed to do it at very first an odd time of day.
Yeah. Okay. I was an intern first, so I guess it's multi pronged. So I started at KNBR in 2000. I guess it was 2009. I was an intern. I was quite literally a broadcast student at SF State and trying to find an internship at KNBR specifically. I was like, how do I get involved here? After a period of time, somebody I knew at SF State in my department had a contact at KNBR, was able to apply for an internship, and ultimately got a promotions internship over the span of a year or so. I actually at one point lied and said, because you had to get credit. You didn't get paid, right? So you had to get credit for school in order to take the internship. I stopped getting credit at school, but I was like, I want to keep working for free at KNBR. This is my dream job. I want to be here. So I just pretended that I continued to get credit, and I was like an intern for like another year or 6 months or something, so I could stay on. After the internship ended, and I'd done some stuff both on the production side and the promotion side, I didn't do anything in radio from, I don't know, 2009 until 2015 or whatever, 2016, when I was officially hired. So I was working a bunch of part-time jobs, coffee shop, restaurant, catering. I'd worked at another an iHeartRadio at one point doing some traffic producing, but the goal was to get in at KNBR. And so I got hired as a part-timer, as a board operator and sound editor, but it was only for 1 day a week. So my one shift for like the first 8 months I worked there, dude, was on Sunday morning, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Um, because of that, I had no real contact with any real bosses or like people who worked at the leader throughout the week. Like, as you know, on the weekends, it's a much different staff. It's a skeleton crew. You get different people who are there, and you're just kind of running robot radio. I think my first shift ever, I had to run like a Wimbledon semifinal or something on the radio. You're running NASCAR games. You're running sort of robot radio, right? Just sort of syndicated stuff or live events early in the morning on a Sunday morning. So I basically decided once I got hired, I'm going to say yes to everything. If they ask me to work Christmas, I'll say yes. If they ask me to work overnights, I'll say yes. And so for like 6 months, all I did was work Sunday mornings. I should add this because I had no contact with anybody during the week, no bosses, no management or anything. I actually didn't get paid for the first like 6 or 7 months that I worked at KNBR because I didn't know how to fill out whatever form. I didn't get the right forms, or I didn't, whatever had happened, and I had no contact with like the HR person. We had one on site, so I worked for months before anybody like had given me an email address. I got a key card. That was about it. Didn't get paid. Didn't do anything. We're just showing up to do the job, thinking whatever. This will maybe one day lead to something. At one point, I decided I was going to record like a sports update or something for a program director of ours, and he gave me some feedback and some pointers on it. It's so hard to remember the order of which things happen. It really goes kind of like board operator, producer, try to get on air. The reason I got on air was they were blowing out the sports updates. We used to do a sports update every bottom of the hour. You give an update about what's going on in sports, the game coming up tonight and whatnot. I'd done a few of those, and then they decided they were going to make changes. As I said, they laid a bunch of people off. They had already sold the spots for the sports updates, but they had laid off the people who did the sports updates. So the first time I got on air, Kerry, was Lee Hammer asked me, can you record these last two? Can you do the last two or three sports updates for us? Because they were already sold by, they'd already been paid for, so we had to air them, even though we didn't have anybody to do them. That was the first time I was ever on air. Was Lee came down the hall to the 1050 studio, said, "Would you like to do the last three sports updates?" And I did them, and that's kind of where we are. There's a whole another story as to why I ended up at 5 a.m. doing the leadoff spot, but that was really the foray into being on air. As we said earlier, it was about the company getting cheaper, not having somebody to do the job after they decided they didn't need this product, yet they'd already sold it. And so that was my first foray into being on air.
Do you think that I'm sure you get dozens of kids who are up and coming through the Bay Area sports media scene, college students reaching out to you, interested in working in sports radio. Do you think your path that you took from, say, 2009 to 2015 still applies today? Like, can someone take your direct path into working in sports talk radio and have that work out for them? Because this is something that I struggle with. I don't know that someone can go in and be the sports editor of the San Francisco Standard and follow the same path that I took, for the last 5, 6, 7 years and have that work out for them. It's often difficult for me to give advice to young kids, but I feel like maybe in your situation, working at a radio station, there is hope. It's just a multi-year grind.
Yeah, I would say my path is probably still similar to a good way to get in or get on air. Like we don't really do internships anymore. We do still have the part-time jobs. I mean, really, and I think that's the hardest part of almost any job. And I would say that's how this applies is it's hard to figure out unless there's an actual ladder for somebody to get somewhere. Like this is a performative job. It's an entertainment based job. It's based on whoever the boss is at whatever time deciding you're the right person to be on air or to be that entertainment for the station. It like would my path still work today? I think so. I think Greg Silver, who's on in the afternoon, Papa and Silver. I mean, he's in his mid 20s, late 20s. That's a guy who pretty much followed that path. Was a part time guy, got a couple opportunities on air. This is something that I think is hard to explain to somebody too, is because it's not a job where you can just train to do the job. You do have to have, I would say, chops, right? You've
Mhm.
got to be able to sink on the air and figure out your way to swim out of it, right? We've all been there where your first couple of times you're on air, you talk and talk and talk, and you feel like it's been 45 minutes, and you look up and it's been 6, and you're like, oh my god, dude, I have 54 minutes that I have to fill still for this hour. I mean, there's some stuff that you just have to do the job for, but I think the path to being on air, the best thing I would say to any kid, and I have these conversations with people all the time, best thing I would say is record yourself. This is something that is very real now in the world that we live in. Get comfortable seeing yourself on camera, hearing your voice, but the path to being on air is really about getting quote discovered, right? I mean, you go back to any musician from way back when, or you've got to have somebody who's willing to give you the opportunity. And also, luck is where preparation meets opportunity, right? I was there and happened to be in the building when they decided we need to do 3 more of these sports reports. They know I'd recorded a few before. They knew that I'd been working on doing something like that. They knew that I could have filled that void, and it's a 30-second sports report, but that gave them all they needed for me to be one of the guys who became the fill-ins. And I think that can be said about a lot of people. So is the path the same? I think the path, it's not like you can, you can't start as the garbage man or the mailman anymore in a company and work your way up to the CEO. That doesn't happen anymore. I do think getting your foot in the door in media on a production side of things opens the door to other opportunities. Still, like it did when I started.
There we go. I've got a few radio specific questions for
Okay.
you. Obviously, you're a 4-hour host in the afternoons with Derek and Dirty Work 2 to 6 on KNBR, but you also do 49ers pregame. In the past, you've done Giants pregame on the weekends, assisting Marty Lurie out of the public house. Preference 49ers pregame on Sundays or Giants pregame on Sundays on site at Oracle Park or Levi Stadium?
Oh, like what would I prefer to do? I haven't done Giants in a long time.
Yeah.
This is like, you ever hear like when Mike Krukow I think it's Dwayne Kuiper will get asked like which ballpark is better, Fenway Park or Wrigley Field? And his answer is whichever one you're in at the time that you ask me, that's the one that's better, like whichever one I'm standing in. I feel like picking one would take something away. The time that I got to spend with Marty Lurie, he was the first host at KNBR who was like, I want that guy to be my co-host. And I didn't really know him. Remember we sat in like the dining room at Oracle Park and the media dining room at one point. We just kind of got to know each other for a bit. And he was like, I want you to be the producer for the show. But he also was like, I've heard you on air and I think you'd be good alongside me. And I love getting to cover 49er football. I mean, that's one of my favorite things I get to do. It is exhausting throughout football season. It's just a constant, you're just on a hamster wheel of sports talk Sunday through Friday. And then it starts up again on Sunday. Um, I think I liked doing the patio stuff differently with Marty because people show up. It was the first time you get real feedback from people. I was also so green and so new at being on air. It was kind of cool to have somebody take you under their wing and be like, I'm gonna help this guy out and he's gonna help me out. And we're gonna get through this together. It was a fun dynamic after Marty had worked with Pecan for many years and he needed somebody to fill that void. And then getting to work on 49ers pregame. I mean, it was myself. It was Ryan Covey was even on it when I started, and Larry Kruger and Dennis Brown and John Lund. And now of all those guys, I'm the only one that's still there, and Krug is still a part of the show. But it's been an evolution of that show to where I became the lead host on pre and post game. I won't pick one because I don't do Giants anymore. And so it'd be hard to say, but I think fondly of when I got to do that with Marty at the start.
Absolutely. You've obviously got a regular stable of guests that you turn to for your show. You've had several guests on various shows throughout the years. Who's your favorite all-time guest you've had on KNBR?
I would say it's one of our regular guests. It's probably Steve Young or Marcus Thompson. I mean, Steve Young, that's the one for me, dude, that is still like we have the coolest job, right? We get to talk to people that we grew. I mean, the fact that like JT Snow will text me talking smack after the Rams beat the 49ers is incredible. Like I grew up, so this is my first baseman of my childhood. And the guy's like, yeah, the Rams kicked the Niners ass this week because he grew up a Rams fan because his dad played for the Rams, which is something I used to tell people when I was like 13 years old. You know, his dad played in the NFL, Jack Thomas Snow. Like that stuff to me is the coolest. But the Steve Young one, like, when he calls in, and we're gonna have him on the show this afternoon, but when he calls in and he says your name, and I'm like, this is my childhood quarterback, right? I don't remember Joe Montana playing. I was a Steve Young guy just based on my age, but that's a pinch me one for sure. When I heard you guys talking earlier, and like Steve Young's driving around listening to the show. It's incredible. And then Marcus Thompson has been like a big brother to me in sports media. Truly, you're the one who coined this phrase to me, by the way, Corey, Kerry, and I say it every week is the best sports writer in America. I really do believe Marcus Thompson is like the best sports writer in the country, if not top three. And we get to talk to him every week. The guy's incredible. He's wildly talented. He's witty. He's funny. I think favorites are people that you can have conversations with in a variety of different ways. You can have serious talks. You can have poignant moments. You can laugh. You can make fun of each other, which is the relationship we've built with both of those guys. And when you do that, the audience feels more a part of both of you guys and more connected because they get to be a part of that building of that relationship. So to me, it's no question. It's Steve Young. And then I got to throw Marcus Thompson in there because he's just one of my favorite dudes.
If you could host one show with someone who doesn't work in San Francisco media, but someone who, say, works in national media, and you could talk 49ers, Giants, Warriors, national sports with someone, who would you pick from out there currently working? Whose work do you admire that you'd say, okay, let's get one show on the books. I'd love to work with this person.
Ooh, from outside of San Francisco. I've got a friend up in Canada. I talk to her all the time. She's a big hockey fan, and her name's Katie Caldwell is her name. I always call her something different, so I was like, I better get this right. Katie Caldwell is her name. She's a good hockey analyst. She's a great football analyst. I love her podcast that she does, the Gridiron podcast, up in Canada with a couple of guys who are based out of Florida, I believe. She's an awesome one who I'd love to do a show with. I'm trying to think of somebody else that I would really like to work with. Kylan Mills is somebody that you and I both know who's grown a lot, I feel like, in this industry. Somebody who's just a friend of mine who I'm comfortable with. It's really for me about somebody who it's hard for me to guess that or pick that because it's somebody I feel like I'd have to know or be comfortable with to know you're going to like when somebody's off, if Derek's off, they'll ask me, who do you want to fill in for Derek? It's usually a list of like, is Kerry available? Is Dieter Kurtenbach available? It's like people we have access to, but also I know I have rapport with. It's funny you asked that though, because I do remember being 16 years old and driving my sister to high school. And we were about to turn into our driveway, and it was the first day that Murph and Mac had started. And I remember thinking to myself in the car, dude, this would be an incredible show to work on. And then I thought to myself almost right after, what are the chances the show would even be on by the time I'm old enough to work on it? And of course, if I were to work in radio, I'd probably have to move away to Idaho or some other state and go work my way back. And then I ultimately got to work on that show, which is pretty incredible. So I can't think of one off the top of my head, like nationwide, who I would pick, but I have had that moment before of, boy, this would be a cool show to work with or on. And then, like, I don't know, 12 years later, it happened, which was bizarre to me.
Yeah. And then I guess the last one for you is you've had every possible job you can have at a radio station. You've been a board operator, you've been a producer, you've given sports updates, a host, program director. What's something that people who only listen on air on a daily basis don't understand about a radio station? Like, tell us something from behind the scenes that's just critical to making things happen and happen in a way that captures people's attention, makes sports talk radio meaningful.
Something that people don't know about, like some behind the scenes, like a peek behind the curtain thing that make it.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize how organized the shows are behind the scenes because it is a bit of organized chaos on air. And because it's live, it's so different than a podcast in that you can edit. And I mentioned this earlier, like if you hear something in real time, people go, I remember where I was when that bit happened, or when they got into that argument, or when Steve Young said this or Marcus said that. Like, people remember where they are, and it's a fleeting moment. You can go back and hear it again on a podcast, but hearing it live makes you feel like you're a part of that moment. That stuff, and when that stuff comes out of the work we do behind the scenes, where every day we schedule what every segment is going to look like, what we talk about here, what this topic is, where the guest is, what soundbite we play here, all that stuff is organized, but it is a living, breathing organism, right? Like, you've got to take that and say, this is our platform for the show, but if need be, we can branch off because somebody, one, breaking news happens, but also somebody could say something funny or ridiculous or out of pocket or out of line that spawns an entirely different conversation. We had a 20-minute conversation yesterday about whether or not Derek dries his plates in a dish rack, and then he admitted he didn't have a dish rack, which made it a conversation. We're like, grown man doesn't have a dish rack. I mean, he's unapologetically a bachelor, which is hilarious. But in and of itself, like the idea that it's something that we decide is going to be super organized and is going to be talked about in different sections at different times exactly, and that things then become chaotic and you have to pull it back, or you have to, I think that's something I have the most pride in, is when something explodes or blows up, how you run with it. Can you make this be a segment and then build on this for the remainder of the show? But I don't think people realize how organized behind the scenes every show has to be, or we'd never get through 4 hours.
Yeah, it's very well said. And, you talking about the moments that you think about where you were. I can tell you, I was on Lake Merced Boulevard driving home from soccer practice the day that Ralph Barbieri said to Brian Sabian, what about Salsa Lamaki? And that's just like, we're talking 17, 18 years ago.
Yeah,
and that
dude,
is one of the iconic moments in sports talk radio. And I still remember it.
I was with my dad in his Miata on Van Ness in San Francisco when that happened. You and I were listening to the exact same thing at the exact same time. There's no way to go back and pull that podcast from 2000. Salsa Lamaki. Why? is what Sabian says back. I also remember Ralph saying, Tim Lindsay gives that made of porcelain. You gotta let him go.
Oh my goodness. My goodness.
It's incredible.
We could go on. We could go on and on, but Coach, we definitely want to have you on either end of this year, beginning of next year, previewing the year in Bay Area sports. But really appreciate your time on Section 415, and definitely look forward to having you back one day.
Great to be on, and anytime, man. Appreciate it.